Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Two-Way Tonight. I am Mark Halperin, your guide through the morass that is today. It's August, and not a ton of news generated except by the mouth of one man. Donald Trump spent 40 minutes on CNBC this morning and then had a photo op this afternoon. He talked quite a bit. I took a lot of questions about a lot of stuff. There's things moving around on redistricting. No major developments on that. But that's an ongoing story that's of great interest, and the president did talk about that. But as I said, it's another day where most of the news has been generated by our president, who's chatty. So we have two great guests, and we have all of you. So if you'd like to be in on the conversation tonight on anything going on, please raise your hand. If you're here on the Two-Way platform, and if you're watching on X or YouTube, no smack in the chat. Peace, love, and understanding. The morning show, if you watch the morning show, you know that people have been submitting possible theme songs, all AI generated, but delightful. And we had a new submission today on X exploiting Sean's weakness for yacht rock radio. So that's going on, the quest for America to provide us a theme song for that show. Little attention being paid to a theme song for this program. So I'd welcome your participation, whether you write by hand the old-fashioned way or are adept at using AI to create music. Please think about a theme song for this program because, frankly, we're feeling a little left out. In any event, our guests tonight, Kristin Davison, Republican strategist, and Ian Smith of Navigator Research, will be here in just a moment. I'll run through the headlines and, again, welcome your participation. The New York Times this morning, and we mentioned it, I think, on the morning meeting, ran an extraordinary story about Jeffrey Epstein's New York townhouse. Nothing massively revelatory about what's been previously reported, but they obtained photos of the townhouse, and they're kind of incredible. We'll show you some of them, but it's one of many things that occurred today that has kind of revived the Epstein story, arguably amongst the top stories of the day. And we will talk about that. We'll show you some of those photos that are a little troubling. And then there's the as I said, redistricting story, and there is also development, one big development in the what I call Russiagate story, which is the House of Representatives is pursuing information there. All right. Let's bring in our guests, and we'll get rolling with the news. As always, again, please raise your hand if you'd like to be in on the conversation. Here is the one and only Kristin Davison. Kristin, welcome in. How's everything going with you?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
Are you working very hard this summer, or are you taking a bit of a break?
Oh, I think it's a mix of both. I think it's good to have balance. The older you get, the more important you figure out that is. So try and do a little bit of both.
And what's going on with the governor's race in the Old Dominion, where the conventional wisdom is the Republican candidate is not the strongest candidate ever fielded?
I think it's kind of a cop out to blame the candidate usually. So I would encourage viewership, people watching and people voting in Virginia not to rush to that conclusion. Campaigns, they win elections, and so I think right now you have the Democrat candidate. She's running a very strong campaign, and I think on the Republican side, there's slowly kind of turning it around, and so we'll see. I think it's a tough uphill race. Take all the historical precedent aside of why it's difficult for the party that's in the White House to win in Virginia the next year, but I think people they're trying their best, but it's going to be tough.
All right, Mr. Smith, welcome in. Very happy to have you back here.
Are
you taking time off this summer, or are you just being made available to be on Two-Way?
Both. No, I'm joking. I am not taking time off this summer. I'm saving my vacation time for post Labor Day.
Interesting choice. Maybe a wise choice. I made a mistake earlier when I said that House subpoenas today were for Russiagate. They're not. They're for Epstein, and we'll talk about that. And we're going to start with Epstein because a lot happened on it, and it's a story of interest to many. Kristin, what's your general sense of where we are in the Epstein matter?
There's so much, and I think this is probably by design, so well done for everyone pushing a lot of things out into the ether. But I think, there are two things. There's a lot of news going on between redistricting and just typical news of the day, Russiagate. Everything is kind of taking a little bit of that oxygen. And then it's also August. And so you have a lot of people around the country, even people where the Epstein issue is their number one issue, who are going to go take that last weekend with their family before school starts, or, focus on things like that. So I think it's fallen a little bit in terms of where it is in the electorate. But I don't think it's going to go away. I think it's something that we will continue to talk about, and we'll have moments of intensity. But right now we're in a little bit of a lull, I think, on it.
Mr. Smith, lull, intense, where do you see it?
Yeah, I don't see the Epstein story leading the headlines forever, but I do think that the damage that was done is permanent. In that there was a breach of trust just fundamentally among him and his supporters in a contract that they agreed to going into this presidency, to say, hey, I was the transparent one. I was the one outside of the swamp. And to kind of have this seemingly about face without any real kind of answers to show for it is just going to be consistently something that was a mark against him in this moment. Does that matter forever? Don't know. But as far as kind of the headline leaning nature of the story, I'm sure we'll have a couple more weeks of it, but out of the summer, I don't really see it persisting.
All right, a bunch of developments today, which I'll run through. First of all, there's a town hall by a Republican House member yesterday, and I try not to make a big deal of town halls, no matter what, because you never know who supplied the audience, right? And so if a right wing or left wing group decides to send 50 people to a town hall, it doesn't necessarily reflect like the grassroots of the actual constituents in the district. So there was a member who had a town hall, and the voters there, the people there, seemed fired up about Epstein and concerned about transparency. I continue to be dumbfounded by the lack of explanation from the Justice Department as to why she was moved to a minimum security prison. It's just amazing to me at a moment when the pressure is on the administration for transparency that they're able to move her, something of value to her, shortly after she does an interview with the Deputy Attorney General, and they're just not giving an answer as to why. Seems baffling. Here's the President of the United States on this matter, as well as the question of her interview with Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General. Number 4, please.
I just a very highly thought of person, respected by everybody. And I didn't talk to him about it, but I will tell you that whatever he asked would be totally appropriate, and it's not an uncommon thing to do that. And I think he probably wants to make sure that, people that should not be involved or aren't involved are not hurt by something that would be very, very unfortunate, very unfair to a lot of people. But I will say this, Todd Blanche is one of the most highly respected people you'll ever meet. So I know this. I didn't discuss it with him, but anything he talked about with her, or the fact that he did that, not unusual, number one, and most importantly is something that would be totally above board.
No, is he referring to the transfer or the interview there? The transfer?
He's referring to the interview. He says he didn't know anything in advance about.
Yeah.
Well, he says the transfer is what he says is not unusual.
Right. Okay.
The interview is so that people like him don't get dragged into it when they had nothing to do with it.
Right. So, okay. Thank you for that. So number 5, CNN is reporting that the administration is debating what to do with Blanche's 10 hours of time with Maxwell. That consists of both a audio recording and a transcript. And CNN says they're debating whether to redact it, to take out, certain names, and whether to release that or not. All right. Next, House Republicans issued a number of subpoenas today, number 6, to basically nearly every attorney general U.S. Attorney General since the Bush administration, with the exception of what's the guy's name who's the ambassador to NATO? I'll think of it. Anyway, he was Trump's acting attorney general for like 4 months, but I think every other attorney general, and Bill and Hillary, Matt Whitaker, thank you very much. Matthew Bartlett, Matthew Whitaker, not subpoenaed, but all the others, and the Clintons were subpoenaed. And this is significant, first of all, because are all these people going to lawyer up and avoid the subpoena or not? And then the fact that House Republicans are doing this is consistent with the mood of the House Democrats and Republicans, but not in line with what the administration would like, which is to kind of tamp this down. All right, let's look at these pictures from the New York Times story. And again, it's pretty creepy stuff. Here is number 7. The New York Times does not say in the story how they got access to these pictures. This is like a sculpture of a bride clutching a rope. This is interesting. Number 8. This is photos of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell with famous people. You may not be able to see it there, but pictures of them with the Pope, with Mick Jagger, with Bill Clinton, with
Noam Chomsky.
Noam Chomsky, but also Elon Musk, Dalai Lama, somebody says in the chat. I don't know if that's a joke or not. Anyway, there's other pictures from that. And then finally, just want to make sure, is that the only other Epstein thing? Yes, I believe it is. Yeah, there's other pictures, but I'm done with these pictures. But thank you. All right, finally, our partners at Polymarket have a Polymarket that we want to show. We want to Polymarket something related to Maxwell. And this is, will she cut a deal with the feds by August 31st? So by the end of this month, Polymarket traders, you see it there, are putting 15% odds on Maxwell getting out by the end of the month. Right after she was moved, you can see the spike there. That's August 1. That's when she was moved to a minimum security prison. It spiked to 50-50, but now it has dropped back down to just 15%. You know, to me, that's a little low because she was moved, and because they're talking about moving the transcript today. Maxwell's attorneys in New York objected to the release of the grand jury material in her case, causing some legal experts to say it's far less likely. And that's interesting because at the same time that she's clearly at least in conversation with the deputy attorney general, and 15% odds from Polymarket bettors that she would make a deal. She's clashing with the administration's wishes, at least in court. So Ian, let's talk about this thing that we Polymarketed here, which is Maxwell making a deal. What do you think the odds are that she'll make a deal by the end of this month with the feds of some sort?
I have no idea. And I hope it doesn't happen, but she did, along with Jeffrey Epstein, is just kind of disgusting. So I don't want to really see a deal for any of these folks. So I hope it doesn't happen.
Okay, Kristin, what's your sense of whether she'll have some sort of deal in coordination with her conversation of 10 hours or so with the deputy attorney general?
I'm probably in that 15%, and I'm definitely not, very well versed on this, so take it for what it's worth. But I think it's low, and I think right now, obviously she has reason and motivation to want to make a deal and get out, but I don't see the upside from like the Republican standpoint. I think that if she were to make a deal and get out, there's the potential there that anything that she has said or any record they release will have a shadow of doubt. And so I don't see there's a whole lot of upside to give her a deal for anyone, herself. And I think she's probably the last person that deserves that.
Yeah, we'll continue to Polymarket this because I would bet, if you pardon the use of the word bet, I'd bet that if there are signs that that the deputy attorney general is moving towards some sort of activity with her, further activity with her, that people will begin to think that there's going to be a deal. And of course, as you both have suggested, there'd be a lot of skepticism around a deal, and whether the victims would obviously be engaged in that, and whether or not she is really offering up anything of enough value to earn some sort of deal, whether that's her freedom or whether she can stay in this minimum security prison. Presumably, her life is a lot better there than it was in the previous place. Again, that's from our partners at Polymarket. If you're wondering about Polymarket and U.S. better access to Polymarket, you want to know more about that, you can go to polymarket.com/USA to read more about that. All right, let's move on to another topic. There is a move by the Justice Department in what was learned yesterday as a grand jury probe now of Russiagate Gate. Number 11, please. The Justice Department sent a letter to the National Archives today looking for more information. DOJ escalates probe into claims Obama officials conspired in 2016 election. This story on this program on the platform remains one where we're trying to be even keeled about it. We don't know that we're ready to preside over Barack Obama's indictment, but we also know we're not ready to dismiss that anything occurred that could be illegal. And I continue to hear from various people inside and outside the government with experience in these areas that once officials start to be brought before the grand jury, it's a much different thing. Kristin, as far as I know, it's not a crime to lie on MSNBC, but it is a crime to lie before a grand jury. So where do you see this story right now? What if anything are you curious about?
Well, I think there's probably a Venn diagram of people who, their number one issue is the Epstein case, and then this is also the number one issue. And I'm sure that there's a group of people where they both agree this is their number one issue to talk through. So I think there's that. It's definitely taken some of the direction away from that story. I think it's worth looking into. I think we'll see that continue to try to get some finality on whichever direction it goes. I don't know if it will necessarily go to the lengths of a jury. Maybe it will, but I think at the very least we'll see a few more rounds to get some more facts and some more clarity, because again, I don't want to compare because it's not apples to apples, this and Epstein, but it's the doubt here. That's the danger this time for Democrats and for Republicans. So it's in everyone's best interest to alleviate any of that doubt. And if people, committed crimes and did wrong things, and that should come to light and be accountable. And if they didn't, then that should come to light too.
Ian, I should make clear, while it's not a crime to lie on MSNBC, it is a crime to lie on two-way. So please choose your words carefully. Are you interested in this story? Or you think the public is interested in this story? You think there's a there, or is this all a bunch of hooey meant to distract from the matter of Jeffrey Epstein?
I think the interest in this is largely going to be partisan, as a lot of things are. More Republican or conservative leaning folks will find interest in this story, where kind of more independent Democratic folks may find less. With that said, I think that there is always an appetite, especially among Trump's base, for investigation into these matters, especially when the names like Obama and Clinton come up. That's like the go-to well. But I do think while there is an interest in this investigation because of the parties, there's also just the acknowledgement this is an obvious distraction that he tried to start to pivot to just as the Epstein story started to roll, right? Yeah. One of the first kind of headline grabbers or phishing attempts was, hey, this is Obama, Bill, Hillary Clinton, right? Like the list goes on. So we'll see what comes of it. I think this investigation was possible on any timeline, but to everybody but the most loyal, I think it's an obvious distraction.
Yeah, I appreciate the way you just framed it. Another story that I'm really curious about whether you guys think real people care about it is this redistricting fight. I hear both sides talk about it in very, apocalyptic terms, and particularly on the Democrats now, there's just this rhetoric of, we will fight and sacrifice, and a constant invocation of Donald Trump. And I wish I could get on a plane to Green Bay right now and go to a diner, because I just can't imagine real people. This is just a pure process thing to me. So I want to get your view on that. I don't want to minimize it because obviously, as a bank shot has an effect on the real lives of real people. But let me just run through some elements here. Number 13, the FBI asked today by, I think, Texas, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe by somebody in Congress, I think, asked to arrest Texas Democrats in battle over House seats. I can only imagine the escalation of this as a cable news story if FBI agents start, walking around Chicago trying to rouse folks. And I don't know what they would do, handcuff them and bring them to a government charter and fly them back to Texas. I mean, that seems ridiculous. President talked about it today and talked about the prospect of arresting fugitive Texas Democrats. Here's the president. Number 14, please.
Trump, nice to see you got off the roof all right.
Yeah.
You said this morning that you probably won't be running for a third term. This weekend, Secretary of State Rubio said that he thought JD Vance
this is the wrong one.
Would be a great nominee.
Hold on, this is 16. Kill this one.
Hold on. Nice to see you got off the roof all right.
Yeah.
Hold on. Stop playing this one.
You said this morning that
Stop playing this one. That's 16. We want to play that because it's interesting, but I want number 14, please. Number 14, if we have that. And then I also want number 15. So either one's good. In any event, the president said that they may have to address fugitive Democrats, and he said blue states are retaliating. Do we have either of those? 14 or 15?
If Texas redrawing their congressional map would get you 5 safe red seats, means that California, New York, Illinois, and Maryland are all going to redraw their maps to add safe.
Well, they'll do it anyway.
Is it worth it?
Yeah, they'll do it anyway. Why? If we stop over there, they would have done it anyway.
I don't think he's right about that. Do we have number 14 on the arrests? I don't know if we do. I will say this, and Ian, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, or Kristin will, but this is a little bit of a shot in one direction. I understand that Texas is redistricting mid-decade, and that's unusual, but not without precedent. But all these states like Illinois and Maryland and Massachusetts, the president talked about this morning, they've gerrymandered for political advantage. So I don't recall reading a single thing about how outrageous it was that some blue states have done this. And the fact that Texas is trying to do it again mid-decade is another form of, you would call it brass knuckles or bare knuckles. But I just don't understand I do understand it because it's the normal media bias, but I don't understand how there can be no proportionality here. And that's basically what the president was saying. Now, I think he's wrong. I think these other states would probably drop what they're doing because I don't know that they're going to succeed. In any event, enough for me. Ian, do you think real people care about this redistricting fight, and they're looking at Democratic efforts, the fleeing Texas legislators, the efforts by Gavin Newsom and others? Do you think real voters are really engaged with this, or is this just an adjunct of the Rachel Maddow Club?
It's pretty soon for me to have data back. Going to get out of the field next week. But when I do, I would venture to guess, and I'll be back on the show, so I'll tell you that most normal people do not care about this, especially those who aren't kind of hyper politically engaged, right? We know that it's kind of close to home issues, things affecting them or their close friends and family. So outside of Texas, I would like to see the awareness numbers on this story more over the impact numbers. But with that being said, for those who are aware, we do know that there's less faith now in government and process than ever. And I think that this kind of effort in Texas and potential retaliation will do nothing more than kind of lay that more out to bear, right? Where the president's saying they're going to do it, so we're going to do it, and vice versa. I think for the average American average voter, that's going to be seen as process and politics, and that's something that we've heard over and over again that they're kind of tired of.
Yeah, Kristin, Ian's rigorous and he likes data. I just like to talk out of my elbow or some other body part. But is your sense that this is an issue that voters on one or both sides care about, or this is really just more inside than the rules committee?
Yeah, I think it's pretty, maybe not that inside, but it's close. This is one of those things where people are going to put their jerseys on. So Republicans are going to bunker down, Democrats are going to bunker down. I think it's probably good for both. Democrats have been kind of at war with each other over where the party's going. They can kind of rally around this one thing. You can watch Democrats fly to Illinois and they put on a big song and dance, and to the average voter, they're wondering what's happening. But to a base Democrat who is, annoyed with their party, they're going to come together and rally there. And Republicans, the same thing. They're going to see Attorney General Ken Paxton say he's going to make these guys leave their seats, and they are relinquishing their positions, and the Republicans are going to rally around that because, yes, of course, to your point, the media has been a little bit biased with this, where when blue states have done this, and frankly, when Democrats and others in Texas kind of handled this the first time around and didn't do it the right way, it wasn't covered. So Republicans have that, to rally around. So this is a base play, which is probably going into the midterms. We'll see which base is more radicalized by it. I don't mean that in the negative way, which enthused is probably a better word. Yeah. I tend to think maybe Democrats might be, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's definitely a base play, but even for the base, I mean, I'm just confused about the level of passion that Democratic, like these Texas legislators and Governor Newsom, they're acting like this is, really, really, really important as opposed to a process thing. And again, I'm not minimizing control of the House at all, but it is a process story and a bank shot. All right, I'm going to want to play the soundbite you just played inadvertently, number 16. The president was asked. Peter Doocy of Fox seems to have just had basically a one-on-one interview with the president today during this photo op, because every question I've heard so far from this has been from Peter. Peter Doocy was asking about the prospect that J.D. Vance would be the nominee, and you'll see the president basically played political pundit and agrees with me that we may be headed towards a mortal lock, unusual, of a Vance Rubio ticket endorsed by Donald Trump that would preclude Kristen's friend Glenn Youngkin or anybody else from even thinking about running. Please roll number 16.
Nice to see you got off the roof all right.
Yeah.
You said this morning that you probably won't be running for a third term. This weekend, Secretary of State Rubio said that he thought J.D. Vance would be a great nominee. You could clear the entire Republican field right now. Do you agree that the heir apparent to MAGA is J.D. Vance?
Well, I think most likely, in all fairness, he's the vice president. I think Marco is also somebody that maybe would get together with J.D. in some form. I also think we have incredible people, some of the people on the stage right here. So it's too early, obviously, to talk about it, but certainly he's doing a great job, and he would be probably favored at this point.
So I interviewed Corey Lewandowski on Next Up, which is available now, my show on the Megyn Kelly platform. And he said the same thing. He said, sure, whoever Donald Trump endorses will be the nominee. And sure, he could endorse J.D. Vance. And sure, Rubio could be on the ticket. But it's too early. And of course, it's by some definitions too early. But this is an unusual situation because J.D. Vance is the vice president and Donald Trump has such a hold on the party. And every Republican I've covered running for House, Senate, or governor in the last 5 years, when I ask them, well, you got a primary, you're going to be able to raise money, or, what kind of staff are you building, or who's your pollster? They'll say, well, all that matters is whether Donald Trump endorses me. If Donald Trump endorses me, I'll be the nominee. And if Donald Trump won't, I'll fold up my campaign, or I won't, but I know I can't win. So, Kristin, I know it's early, and I know there are plenty of other ambitious Republicans who would like to run, but the president there was leaning into what I have been leaning into, which is on the current trajectory. It's hard to imagine him not endorsing J.D. Vance. And if he endorses J.D. Vance will have $3 billion. It'd be hard to imagine him not being the nominee. What say you, Kristin Davison? Disinterested party.
Yeah, no, it is too early. All those caveats aside, look, I think the vice president is doing a great job. And I think the president handled that question brilliantly today. He, of course, he's going to say his vice president is doing a great job, which he is. I mean, it's almost an impossible job to be not just the vice president, but Donald Trump's vice president, right? There's so much humility and success that you have to balance in that position. And I think JD has surprised a lot of people with how gracefully he's done that. Now looking ahead, it basically puts the whole party and anyone else kind of look at it, I would think, in a very awkward position, because if you say that President Trump was wrong or that he won't endorse JD, then you're basically saying you don't want them to succeed. So it is such a catch-22 that I caution anyone looking at it that, basically anyone looking at 2028 right now in August of 2025 needs to be very careful, because we have to look at the midterms and so many things ahead, and not focusing on that alone is basically saying that you don't want Trump and Vance to succeed. And so it's a very delicate dance that people need to do. And so I think the president handled the question great. I don't know who he will endorse. It does seem to reason that he would stand with his vice president. And I don't believe the vice president has given him a reason not to support him yet, but we have a long game to play. And right now, the inning that we're in is focused on advocating for, the good things about the big, beautiful bill. I mean, that's one thing we're, a half hour into the show now. We haven't really talked about any of that so much, absent the town hall that we mentioned before. But that's what Republicans need to be focused on now. I get that it's really great to talk about 28. Everyone's focused on it. But the only thing Republicans should be focusing on right now is reminding voters, people who will be looking at 25 in Virginia, in New Jersey, and in 26 in all these other states, that what that bill will do for them, not just a list of things, just like how the money is going back into their hands. And so anyone that's doing anything other than that, I think, puts themselves in a tough position, which is why I don't think you'll see Rubio or Vance take the bait on that question.
Kristin, I take your point entirely that that's more front and center. But paradoxically to me, it's not too early to see the contours of where JD Vance is going to be in 2 years. It is too early for me to see the contours of how voters are going to think about that bill. I understand like Republicans are trying to sell it now, and earlier the better, and Democrats are already attacking it. But it's so up for grabs, and what will determine who wins that fight. I think it's impossible to say. I'm not even sure a year from now we'll be able to say who's winning that fight. In my view.
Yeah, well, and that's why I think that that's even more important in 28 than who the nominee will be, right?
Yeah.
So let's just say we can win the primary to go lose the war. But a lot of the provisions in that bill kick in 27, 28. So that's going to be even more of a battle to go and win it now. And I don't know who will win that battle back and forth. I do know that Republicans have a lot of the facts on their side, and to keep that up in an aggressive way will pay off in 28 if we do the work now.
Yeah. Ian, I'd love for you to weigh in on both. First, what some would consider superficial and premature question of whether JD Vance is on a glide path to the nomination. And then second, how do you see the contours of the conversation about selling or knocking down the reconciliation law?
Yeah. On the first question, I think your analysis is totally right. And I think that's going to be the kind of fundamental flaw for any of the candidates, is that Trump is going to decide who the Republican nominee is, and the Republican nominee will not be Trump. And I think those two things are a paradox that folks are going to have to build a brand for themselves if they really want to inspire the people who are so inspired by Trump. Yeah. So sure, if he's saying that now, then as the wind blows tomorrow, we could be hearing a different tune. But if the nomination or the primary was today, they would win. Yeah. On the reconciliation bill, I think that voters are pretty aware of what's in it, and they don't see, even the ones who aren't affected by Medicaid, SNAP, any of the benefits cuts that are kind of littered throughout the bill. They don't see real benefits for themselves, at least not those that would be kind of life-changing or grandly altering, as they do see benefits happening for the wealthy coming out of these tax cuts, et cetera. And that's what he promised. So his supporters are going to be happy about the kind of 2028 rebates that they see come back. They will have slightly lower taxes, but what's going to hit on those moments too is the 70% of voters that we know somebody on Medicaid, know the 58% that we know somebody benefiting from SNAP, the kids going to school who are in special ed, who are now not going to be able to have their programs as well funded. So the contours will make themselves clear when that happens, to Christian's point, but I don't necessarily see time being kind to this legislation.
Okay, we shall see. As they say in the news business, only time will tell. All right. Well, a couple more topics and we're going to get to your questions. So please raise your hand if you want in on the conversation. As I said, I interviewed Corey Lewandowski, who was Donald Trump's original campaign manager in 2015, still very close to the president and to folks in the administration. And we talked about JD Vance and how he's doing. We also talked about Susie Wiles, and Corey gives the best explanation I've heard anywhere of why she's such an effective chief of staff of the president, why the president so trusts her. So I recommend the interview for that. We also talked about Scott Bessent, who he's known since, I think he said 2017. And we talked about Bessent's rise in Trump world. This morning at CNBC, the president took Scott Bessent out pretty Sherman-esquely, pretty fully, saying he would not be the new Fed nominee, even though some had speculated that it was Bessent's, if he wanted it. The president said basically Bessent doesn't want it. Here is number 24. Here is Corey Lewandowski on Next Up talking about the rise of Scott Bessent in Trump world.
So I've known Scott a long time. For your viewers who don't know, he was very successful on Wall Street, ran a company called Key Square. And then when the kind of financial, when COVID hit, he moved down to South Carolina. And he's got 2 kids that he and his husband have adopted, and said, listen, we can do better. Scott is been a stalwart of strong America First policies from the financial side, and he has been just a phenomenal spokesman for this administration. Scott started coming to Mar-a-Lago to brief the president probably in 2021 after President Trump was out of office, and they started to develop a rapport. And Scott is so good on television. He's so calm. He's so smart. And listen, Scott has a pedigree that puts him with the very best and the brightest in the financial world, whether it's the Milkins of the world or any of those people that have been the luminaries in the financial markets over the years. Scott has been incredibly successful in his own right from a financial side, from an economic side, and then he's gone out and advocated for the president's policy. So because of that, there is, as you know, Mark, a very, very strong debate of who would become the Secretary of the Treasury. Two cabinet members both wanted it very much, Howard Lutnick and Scott Bessent. Scott ended up obviously getting that position. I think he's done a phenomenal job, and he's so good on television. He's so calm on television. He's so smart on television that I think the president has respected that. I know today the president announced that Scott will not be the next Fed chair. The president made that announcement today. I understand it, but Scott is continuing to drive this economy in a very strong fashion with the full support of the president.
Ian, if you had a client who wanted to be a Treasury Secretary in the next Democratic administration, and they said, what can I learn from Scott Bessent about how to do this job? What are things you think Bessent does well that would be worth emulating regardless of party?
I think that I wouldn't be able to give Scott Bessent as an example of what to be, because he's in a unique situation where most of his job is actually making sure that a singular man likes him more so than running the economy. As we heard Corey say, his one trait that was called out above and beyond everything else was how good he was on TV. So I would say do not.
Do you agree? Do you agree he's good on TV?
I don't really watch Scott Bessent on TV, to be fair.
Okay.
Just going off of Corey's word, I'm sure he has an ear on it. But I would say unless the president is Donald Trump, then that's a kind of a one-man band.
Kristin, same question to you. Let's say Glenn Youngkin wants to be Treasury Secretary, just hypothetically. What does Scott Bessent do well that you think is emulatable?
Oh, well, the governor would be great, but I do think that Secretary Bessent, he is good on TV, and it's not. I believe it's different than someone. There are plenty of people that go on TV to try to get President Trump's attention. I don't believe that Secretary Bessent is that person. He just exudes such confidence and knowledge on the economy and on what's going on that he calms people down. And that's a gift that I don't believe is him just preaching to an audience of one. I think that is, his gift of going on TV is not the superficial, he just, wants to be out there and be a talking point. He actually is the most effective communicator of what is going on with Trump's economic policy, aside from President Trump himself, because he has a unique way, obviously, that we all know. But I think Bessent, the way he is able to not just talk in talking points and whatever, a national committee is putting out for the day, but actually exude knowledge and confidence on such a complex issue that affects everyday lives, I think is a very unique gift. And that's what is really needed in that position.
Okay. Again, my interview with Corey is on next up, as well as an interview with the mayor of Detroit, who's been reelected 3 times, has an extraordinarily high approval rating, and he's running Mike Duggan as a independent for governor of Michigan. We don't know who the Democrat and Republican nominees are, but they're very strong candidates running on both sides of the major party lines. Kristin, I don't know how familiar you are with that race and with the mayor, but if someone came to you and said, I want to run for governor of a big industrial state as an independent, just as a general matter, is that plausible, realistic, or not? Depending on the strength, obviously, of the candidates. But let's say you had a strong candidate. Would you recommend someone do that these days?
I wouldn't. I think right now, I don't think we're there yet where an independent can carry a state like Michigan or Pennsylvania or these large states. I do think they would be a spoiler. So I would probably ask, who are you trying to catapult here? Because you're going to bring someone down. You'll see, Pennsylvania is probably a better example. Josh Shapiro is a very, very strong governor. He's going to be very formidable for Republican to go against. Republicans should probably get an independent to go get in that race and be a very left-leaning independent to try to take votes away from Shapiro if they want to win. But I just don't see that, the voter turnout in these particularly midterm years, I don't see independents really having enough yet to be able to do that, even if they are a strong candidate. Maybe we'll get there. I think we're probably a cycle or two away from seeing that in a large state like Michigan or Pennsylvania or Wisconsin.
So Ian, the Mayor Duggan has been a Democrat. He supported Kamala Harris, although you run for mayor of Detroit as a nonpartisan office, but no mistaking for the voters. he's a Democrat, and obviously Detroit's not electing any Republicans mayor, so he's a Democrat. How do you see the prospect? Again, I don't know if you know the race, but how do you see the prospect of an independent winning a race like that?
And the country's too hyper partisanized, and especially in Michigan, who is a state that is no stranger to these types of statewide contests. I think that there's no shot in that spoiler argument is true, Christian, where the more aligned you are with either side, because as we know, there's very true, pure independence out there. The tougher you'll make it for those who you're probably more politically aligned with.
Yeah.
But I don't see there being any shot of an actual victory there for an independent.
Yeah, I got to say, he's a very impressive guy, and his record in Detroit is extraordinary. And obviously, a very high percentage of the vote comes from Detroit. And he's running, with that independent message of, I'll get the parties to work together. I'll be curious to see who the nominees are, but we won't know who the nominees are till next year. But it's worth watching the interview, I think, and worth watching him. So again, Corey Lewandowski and Mayor Duggan. And my reported monologue on Next Up is about Kamala Harris and her saying the system is broken and basically taking a break from being relatively active. And what Democrats I've talked to think about that and her prospects for a future role in national politics as a presidential candidate. All that's available now as a podcast and on YouTube. 3 quick stories that have crossed my inbox while we've been on the air. I want to let everybody know about. First of all, Bruce Reed, very close to Bill Clinton and Joe Biden, and a longtime aide to Joe Biden during the presidency, a senior aide. Pretty soft-spoken guy. I've known him a long time, and not a guy who seeks the limelight. He testified before that House committee looking into the question of attempts to shield the president's acuity decline and the use of the auto pen. And contrary to my prediction this morning on the morning meeting that he would take the 5th, he did not take the 5th, and he attributed some of the president's difficulty in public life to his stutter in the debate. It's being reported that Howard Stern's show is going off the air after 20 years on Sirius XM. That'll be a big cultural moment if that's true. And Big Balls, you guys know who that is, a Doge aide, real name Edward Korstein, was involved in a carjacking incident in Washington, D.C., according to various news reports. All right, let's bring folks in for questions. As always, as I bring you in, please unmute. Tell folks where you are and what you have on your mind for Ian and for Kristin. And we'll start with Doug. Doug, welcome in. Oops, hit the wrong button. There you go.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, and good evening, Mark, Kristin, and Ian. I'm in Naples, Florida. I've been a Connecticut voter most of my life. Question on redistricting. I saw one of the Texas state legislators interviewed on TV the other day, asked, why are you doing this? He said, because we can. It's legal and it's to our political advantage. So my question is, it seems to me that states should have independent redistricting. I just asked ChatGPT. 11 states have that. I thought they'd be all blue states. I thought maybe the Democrats are just stupid in this, but they aren't. California has it, Colorado has it, but so does Arkansas and Alaska. So this seems to be evenly split between red and blue states. Is there any non-political reason why there wouldn't be independent redistricting? So I'm just curious what you think, what Kristin thinks, and what Ian thinks. Why wouldn't everybody support this? It seems to be for the good of the country. Yes, it's not to people's political advantage, but times change.
Yeah, great question. Ian.
Yeah, I would say there is no non-political reason, right? I think kind of morally and kind of with common sense, it would make sense. The problem is that we're in a political system, and when you're dealing with game theory, right? Are you going to get everybody to unilaterally disarm at the same time? And I think that's where it becomes difficult. What's supposed to happen now is the Supreme Court is supposed to step in, even with states that are not doing independent redistricting, and say, hey, was this fair? Did this make sense? Is this above board, or is this obviously partisan? And when you have officials saying out front on either side whether or not this is an obviously partisan attempt at redistricting, then it's on the Supreme Court to really get out in front of that, and we'll see what happens here.
Kristin.
I agree a little bit, disagree a little bit. I do think the trust in institutions, even one claiming to be independent, is very low. And so I don't think it's 100% political why not every state has this independent commission. I think there are a lot of voters who have serious doubts about unnamed bureaucrats or commissioners solving this. And at the end of the day, they assume that there is political bias, even in someone who is an independent, on an independent commissioner here. So I think there's a lot of distrust in government and in our institutions, and that's part of it. And, I mean, there's in some states, I'm sure it's political too. They couldn't actually get it on the ballot to create one. But overall, I wouldn't just say automatically it's political. I think there's a lot of distrust on, who is there to help draw the lines and figure it out.
You could just do it by computer. I mean, you could ask AI to do it.
Yeah,
I mean,
you could.
Well, distrust AI too, though.
Yeah. Doug, I'll say a couple things. First of all, the challenge for taking the politics out of this is it's the most political thing, right? It's about jobs. And even though for politicians, and even though it's not the members of Congress themselves doing it, they and governors and others put enormous pressure on the state legislatures to draw maps that are favorable. Now, here's the dirty little secret about these commissions, these so-called nonpartisan independent commissions. Look at California. What do? They don't try to draw fair maps. Generally, what they do is they're incumbent protection. They basically say, we're going to keep in place the current map and not, if one party has 15 seats and the other has 5, they basically just lock that in. What at least some voters want? What do political scientists say is a good idea? Probably most people in this community would say is, we want competitive seats. Right? We want seats where the politicians have to fight for their job, meaning political balance, right? The opposite of the way the partisans draw the district. The partisans draw the district so that it's easy as possible for the incumbents to keep their job. You might argue, and so people say, well, the district should be compact. They shouldn't look like salamanders. The community should be kept together. They should be close to perfect rectangles as possible. But the reality is a perfect rectangle might in fact make it impossible for one of the two parties to win that seat. So really what you want are districts, what some people want are districts that are as close to balance as possible. So that if you're a Republican incumbent has to fight a good Democrat to keep the seat and vice versa. When the independent commissions come in and do this, they do just the opposite. They keep in place districts that are won by one party. And so go look at the districts drawn, for instance, in California by a so-called independent commission and look at how many of them are competitive. Some of them are. And sometimes they change over time because demographics change and people move in and out. But I think the answer has to be, if you really want to have a quote unquote fair process in the public interest, I don't think it's as simple, and not just as Kristin said, for public impression. But I don't think it's as simple as saying independent people should draw them. The people who draw them should be trying to make them competitive, not just compact and not just status quo. And that I haven't studied every state, but the ones I know about, they're not trying to draw them to be competitive. They're trying to draw them to keep the peace, to say, all right, you guys have 10, we have 5, let's keep the status quo.
It seems like a fairness test in California, for example. Let's say 55% of the people in the House vote Democrat and 45% of the entire population vote Republican. Then those seats should split somewhere along 55%.
Correct. 100%. And the president said this morning, I don't know if he was right. Michael, what percentage of the vote did the president get in Massachusetts in 2024? I think he said he got 40%.
Yeah, somewhere around 43, I think. Yeah.
Say again?
I thought it was like 43. It was somewhere around.
So Massachusetts has what, 8 House members? So by that standard, how many should be Republicans? 3 should be Republicans instead of 0. So I agree, Doug, that's what it should be. But go state by state and you won't find that. There are many states like in the West, right, where they have only 1 or 2 members, where Democrats have no representation, right? So Maryland has 1 Republican, Massachusetts has 0, and the president cited those this morning. I won't say it's one of the few times the president was correct in citing statistics, but he was right on point. Those 2 states do not yield the carry principle, where if you get 40% of the vote, you should get 40% of the members of the House. I'd be interested to see every state and how that matches up. But again, the politicians aren't interested in that. The politicians are in consolidating and keeping their power. And if it's a state controlled by one party, that's what they're going to do. I'll say again, as I said before, singling out Texas as if what they're doing is an outrage and deviating from the norm It's just not true, because
Oh,
you can look at New York, where the Democratic governor of New York, or Illinois, where the Democratic governor of Illinois are on their high horse about how Donald Trump is leading Texas into a mockery of our democracy. Their states have done basically the same thing. And there's just no, the press doesn't cover it that way, so it's a little hard to pick that out, but it's true. Doug, thank you. Grateful to you for the question. Crazy topic as far as I'm concerned, but a topic we must cover. Raleigh, welcome in. Thank you for being part of Two Way. Tell folks where you are, what's on your mind for Ian and Kristin.
Yes, I'm in Austin, Texas, and something y'all have not mentioned on this maybe y'all have mentioned in the morning because I have to work in the mornings, but y'all haven't mentioned in the evenings when y'all talk about this, is that actually Democrats have done this before. I don't remember if this was the issue, but they went to New Mexico.
Yeah, we've talked about it. And not watching the program in the morning because you have to work is no excuse. I have to work in the morning. I'm there every day. So just kidding. Yes, sir. Democrats have fled several times before, including over this issue. And in the end, they always fold because they have to come home. But keep going.
But I mean, I find it peculiar that a party that is not liked by the voters of the state is not popular by the voters of the state. I mean, they're a significant minority in the state legislature, and they have been for 30 years, can have so much sway in what the state legislature does just by packing up and leaving, and it can hold hostage that legislature. That sounds very undemocratic to me. That doesn't seem fair, and that doesn't seem the way that a democratic system should work, where a majority of people should make the decisions and should decide how things are done. I guarantee you, if you put this to the voters, they would say that a majority of our House of Representatives seats should be Republican.
Yeah, a majority. Kristin, thoughts on Raleigh's point?
Yeah, but and quickly, I want to correct myself. Trump got 36, not 43. So
yeah,
but
still, that means that two of them should be Republicans at least. Yeah,
right. I think to your point, well, I mean, yes, I think the voters should decide, and I do think that's, if you put that in front of Texas voters this November, that's how it would probably go. Yeah. And I think that's where it ultimately will go. That's why I do think this is such a partisan dance that both sides are doing. And those Democrats are going to come back if they still have their positions, their seats. And right now it's just a lot of theater. And I think that's where it will end up, where we're talking about. We're just going to, instead of putting it to the voters to vote, we're just going to kind of watch a song and dance on both sides until it gets done. And I don't believe that the majority of Texans will be outraged when it's finished.
Ian.
Yeah, I tend to agree with y'all's points that it won't be the majority of Texans that are outraged, but we live in a system where this is going to have national ramifications, right? And I think that's where we get back to the conversation earlier, and it ties into trust in institutions. If the reasoning is because Texans want us to and we can, and it's to our political advantage, that will apply to states across the board. And no matter how gerrymandered we think Texas is, New York, Maryland, pick a state, it's happening in nearly every state. Are we going to get to this place where we're shucking the kind of constitutional mandated fairness in this process, shucking what the Supreme Court's going to say or care about what the Supreme Court says, and going to kind of this war game where now every state, as soon as you get a simple majority of the voters, are we going to start to draw these lines how we say we want to, right? There's a reason why this is laid out in the Constitution as it is. So I think, again, outside of my opinion, for the average voter, they're going to see this as kind of this partisan fight that is process oriented, not really worrying about them and worried more about power. And they're going to wonder how this delivers results. So if either state can make the case nationally that this is going to deliver results, then it is what it is. But I don't see this playing poorly for Republicans in Texas. No.
Raleigh, thank you. Grateful to you. Ian, what are you seeing lately in any data you're seeing about inflation and consumer confidence and concerns about higher prices?
We haven't seen concerns on inflation really drop since the middle of the Biden administration onward. This is a consistent problem. Costs are the issue of the day and have been for years going now. And in many places, in cases, especially when it comes to groceries and housing prices, folks are more concerned now than they've ever been.
Kristin, are you hearing that and seeing that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's an article in the Wall Street Journal either today or yesterday where basically people are making more money, but they are still struggling more to get ahead. And I think that this really is the root of Trump's message, frankly, and the semi-populist note that he really hit is that people, they maybe their wages might be getting better, some costs might be going low, but they still don't feel like they can get ahead. The majority of Americans still feel this tension where they can't, buy a house. They can't pay off their student loans. They are stuck. And so that I don't think until we, particularly we have a lot of governor's races up next year. And I think this will be huge in each one of those states where people they just feel trapped. And I don't see anything that has changed that on the ground, which is why I kind of go back to my original point. Republicans right now, should not be talking about anything other than the fact hey, we just put $5 more in your pocket, or, hey, we just started this account so that your newborn child will have money when they get older. We need to communicate that because people aren't feeling it. They aren't, just because a few prices have gone down and they're making more money, they don't feel like their lives are advancing. And that's a huge problem. And if we can't communicate that on how we're trying to make that better, then they're going to get frustrated and go vote for someone else.
Yeah. Leave aside the president for a moment. I always thought Bill Clinton was pretty good at giving people a sense that he had a theory of the case about how to make the economy better for real people. He just had a way of talking about the economy that gave people confidence that he understood it and that he was determined to make it work for working class folks. Ian, do you see somebody out there in either party who you think has that kind of ability? I know what voters really care about is the actual material facts changing, but assuming that it helps to have somebody who gives people a sense of confidence. Do you see anybody in the party or either party like that today?
Yeah, I think, and this is localized. I'm not going to say this is a national phenomenon, but speaking to both of my grandmothers in New York, I think Mom Donnie is doing some of that. And I know a lot of folks on this call aren't New Yorkers, but that conversation about rent control specifically is an institution that's been in New York for decades at this point. And getting to that in ways that other candidates weren't in that race is kind of an example of talking about the nuts and bolts of affordability.
Yeah.
That's important to some folks, talking about grocery costs. Both my grandmas work in nursing homes, talking about those systems and how to get those workers the help that they desperately need in those nursing homes. So that kind of real world outside of this kind of Washington stuff coming to them and talking to them about how they're going to make that check every 2 weeks last a bit longer is the way forward.
Ian, this might be a big ask, but next time you're on, I'd love for you to bring one or both grandmas.
I'll see.
Love to have them on. Kristin, who do you see out there who gives people a sense and confidence that they know what they're doing on the economy?
Well, Trump aside, I mean, gosh, it's if I have to pick a Republican and a Democrat, I do think Governor DeSantis, I think Governor Abbott, I think Governor Youngkin, I think they do a very good job of communicating. I mean, one of the best ads Youngkin ran in 21 was eliminating the grocery tax. Everyone thinks that was about parents and teachers. I mean, the grocery tax was a huge
shot in a supermarket.
Yeah, it was my favorite one. It was awesome.
Yeah, it's a good ad.
So, and on the Democrat side, I do think I think Governor Shapiro is doing a very good job in Pennsylvania relating, to voters that way and communicating and showing efficiency. I'm not, I hear what you're saying about Mandami, but New York is a unique case. It's kind of hard but I understand what you're saying there. I don't see too many others on that front, but I would say, it's the governors. I mean, that's where, outside of Trump, that's where people will look.
Yeah. And it's why I think Governor Duggan, or Mayor Duggan rather, could win, despite I agree with both of you. It's a very hard thing to do, and it will depend on the major party nominees. But his record of helping people in Detroit on housing and on jobs is quite something. And again, if he ends up running against major party nominees who can't talk fluidly about real lives of real people, I think he's got a shot. In any event, Kristin and Ian, love having you both on always. Genuinely grateful to you for committing an hour of your time to us, and hope you have you back maybe all August because you're both around and everybody else will be in the Hamptons. No, Thank you both. Grateful to you.
Thank you.
I'll be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern time with Sean and Dan for the morning meetings. So join us for that. Again, as I mentioned, Next Up is now up. You can listen to it as a podcast, watch it on YouTube, and my monologue on Kamala Harris, as well as Corey Lewandowski and the mayor of Detroit. And stay tuned now on Michael Moynihan's The Moynihan Report on YouTube, Hamilton Morris on psychoactive substances, which is something we probably should have covered on this episode here, at least more explicitly than we did. Grateful to all of you for being part of the two-way community, and I'll see you at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Have a good night.